Tomorrow, the President of the United States could declare war. Iran is demanding that the United States surrender to the Revolutionary Guards. The more eager Trump is to end the confrontation, the more extreme demands Iran are presenting. After the threats from the Revolutionary Guards, and after Iran's demand for American surrender, Tehran is determined to block the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, Iran is replacing its key security figure. The former commander of the Revolutionary Guards is returning to the center of the stage. One of the most veteran Revolutionary Guards figures and one of the closest people to the Iranian leadership is returning to the heart of the decision-making. And the Revolutionary Guards are boasting about spoils of war that they can claim to have achieved in the conflict with the United States of America. So President Donald Trump is revealing a new way out of the conflict with Iran. And meanwhile, Iran is taking advantage of what it sees as weakness and is setting a price for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which is full compensation from the United States of America. And will Iran announce the death of Mustafa Khamenei in the coming days? Is he alive? Seriously wounded? Missing something? Or has already become a political ghost? Today, we will try to solve the insane mysteries surrounding Iran's new leader, Kalibaf, against the Revolutionary Guards. We will open the battle that is shaking Iran also internally. A new Muslim defense alliance is changing the rules of the game in the Middle East. Oil is giving back some of its gains amidst the uncertainty in the Strait of Hormuz and the Houthi attacks. The alliance that is beginning to worry Israel. Turkey is joining forces with Saudi Arabia, and now it wants Egypt as well. And while Mohammed bin Salman dreams of becoming a nuclear power and building grand regional alliances, the rebels from Yemen are burning Aramco facilities and mocking a power that cannot protect itself. Will the Mecca Agreement, the Sunni alliance that challenges the United States and changes the Middle East, be tested in the coming days? Escalation on the Lebanon front. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a forceful video in which he said that Israel will intensify the war on terror and strike Hezbollah terrorists hard. The money from Iran to Hezbollah is stuck. Israel has hit Hezbollah's oxygen pipeline. The economic war is working, and Hezbollah is on the road to bankruptcy. And in Gaza, while Israel is currently avoiding broad targeted eliminations, Hamas is using the time to rebuild its military and organizational capabilities. The terror organization continues to forcibly recruit children that are holding AK-47 rifles in exchange for pennies. The cycle of terror in Gaza continues. I'm Yair Pinto, joined by Ashlea, and we're boots on the ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and the truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is August 10th, so let's begin. Because President Donald Trump has been examining over the past few weeks the possibility of declaring victory in the war against Iran if Tehran agrees to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to free movement. But a series of new demands from Iran has narrowed his room for maneuver once again. Iran is demanding, amongst the other things that they are demanding, a permanent end to the war, removal of the American naval blockade, withdrawal of American forces from the region, cancellation of sanctions, release of frozen Iranian assets, and also payment of billions of dollars in compensation. In simple terms, the Iranians are explicitly demanding the surrender of the United States and its administration. President Donald Trump made clear last night in an interview that he is betting on economic pressure against Iran doing the job. Trump referred to soaring inflation, the inability to pay salaries even to soldiers, and the American naval blockade, all of which are weighing down Tehran's already fragile economy. Inside the Ayatollah regime, Despite the hardening positions and the hawkish line towards the United States of America, senior officials are warning of a severe economic crisis if the current situation continues. The American naval blockade on Iran, renewed at the end of July after the Revolutionary Guards disrupted the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, is taking a heavy toll on Iran's economy. The Americans are not allowing ships to leave Iran or enter it through the Strait of Hormuz, effectively paralyzing Iran's oil industry. The regime's most important source of income is oil. The Financial Times reported over the weekend that the naval blockade has brought Iranian oil sales to an almost complete halt. Satellite images analyzed by the newspaper indicated that for an entire week, there was no loading of oil tankers at Karag Island, Iran's main export terminal, through which about 90% of the country's oil exports is passing. The satellite images also show that Tehran has begun reducing the oil production in its fields in order to avoid running out of storage space. Because of the drop in revenue, the regime is struggling to pay members of its security forces, and according to a report by Iran International, Trump himself referred to the regime's difficulty in paying its people, telling our correspondent, the Israeli correspondent Barak Ravid, that they do not have money to pay their soldiers. Our naval blockade is very effective. The economic crisis has also reached tens of millions in Iranian citizens. The International Monetary Fund predicts that Iran's economy will shrink by 6% in 2026. The country's annual inflation rate stands at about 69%, and this is according to the IMF, while ordinary Iranians face fuel shortages and other shortages caused by this war. So despite the clear superiority of the United States over Iran, so far the American Navy has not succeeded in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. One reason is the Revolutionary Guard's so-called Mosquito Fleet. As we have reported before, the Mosquito Fleet is a network of small, fast, armed speedboats that remains the most significant threat to shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz, despite the destruction of most of Iran's regular naval forces. This force operates in a form of naval guerrilla warfare that makes it difficult for Western forces to detect and then neutralize it using conventional means, while recent American and Israeli strikes destroyed about 90% of Iran's regular navy. The naval force of the Revolutionary Guards suffered significantly less damage. According to estimates, about half of the fast attack boats are still operational. The force holds dozens of fortified and well-hidden bases along the Persian Gulf, and also uses cheap drones that can cause heavy damage to large and expensive warships. Today, we will look at what is needed to neutralize this threat. The power struggle at the top of Iran is intensifying. Figures from the hardline camp are working to reduce the authority of the Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and transfer more power to the Revolutionary Guards and to ideological elements within the regime. Another shock in Iran's security leadership, Mohsen Razai, who commanded the Revolutionary Guards for many years and is now considered one of the people's closest to the supreme leader, Mustafa Khamenei, has been appointed Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The appointment places Razai at one of the most important decision-making junctions in the Iranian regime. The Supreme National Security Council coordinates Iran's security and strategic policy and connects the political leadership, the military, the Revolutionary Guards, and the security agencies. Turkey is trying to build a broad military bloc in the Middle East, and Israel is watching very closely. 2 days after Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan signed a joint defense agreement in Mecca. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has already marked Egypt as the next candidate to join. Look, the campaign against Iran has led to unprecedented developments in the Middle East. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz, attacks on Gulf states, and the depletion of American defensive interceptors. A dramatic development with direct implications for Israel is the creation of a defense alliance between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. What led to this move? What role does religion play in the cooperation? And what does Israel have to offer in response? We will open the whole issue. Cairo has not yet made a commitment, and the road to joining is not simple. Still, the direction itself and the talks between Ankara and Cairo are concerning. Ankara wants to transform itself from a regional power that acts mostly on its own into a country that gathers armies, money, weapons, and political influence around it. All of this while it maintains a large presence in Syria and is also involved in the ceasefire and the expected arrangement in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis are attacking a port in Yemen, claiming that it contains Saudi weapons, warehouses, barefoot fighters against golden tanks. How are the Houthis humiliating Saudi Arabia live on the camera? While Riyadh projects the world the image of a powerful regional force with nuclear ambitions and an endless wallet, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. An unflattering story of flip-flop militias that are managing to bring the kingdom of Saudi Arabia to its knees. The Houthis are proving that even with sandals and outdated weapons, it is possible to bend those who think that the world belongs to them. And we will soon talk about how the Iranian proxy that hates Israel is paralyzing the entire Middle East. So, there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto. Today I'm joined by Ashlea, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening here in Israel and the truth about what's happening in this region, the Middle East, against the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, which is our biggest threat at this moment. But before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. You can see it here. Bing. It helps us reach more people. Also check if you're subscribed or not. Many of you are watching and you're not subscribers. That way you can get pings and updates about what we're posting and what's happening. Okay? You can also search Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts. We have the links on the description of this video. Currently, many Israelis are still juggling reserve duty while trying to get back to work and then handle their day-to-day lives. It's not easy because your body is tired, your mind is overloaded, and the pressure doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. I've been there, coming home from reserves, trying to be present for my family, catching up at work, while still feeling like I'm in a survival mode. It takes strength, energy, and faith to push through. And that's why I started using Vinya. It's an Israeli superfood supplement made from red grape cells that helps improve the blood flow through your heart, your brain, and your muscles. For me, that meant better focus, more energy, and fewer days of that foggy, burnt out feeling. You know what I'm talking about? I started using it during my reserve duty, and I'm still using it today. So there's also a coffee version and a tea version, and there is a hydration powder that I like very much, especially in hot days. I like to start my day with that because I'm dehydrated, and that gives me enough energy to go through the day. So if you want to give it a try, go to vinyatbnisrael.com. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com or call 800-638-1944. That's 800-638-1944. So faith helped me stay grounded, and Vinya helped me stay sharp. At this point, one detail deserves a closer look. Iran is not only trying to survive the campaign, it is trying to learn from every piece of Western hardline and hardware what falls inside its borders. The Iranian state media are now displaying wreckage that they identify as parts of an American F-15E Strike Eagle, along with an MQ-9 Reaper and an Israeli Hermes 900 drone. The F-15E loss itself is confirmed by the United States military. 44, Dude 44, that's its name, was shot down on April 3rd, and both crew members were later rescued. Tehran is now showing what happens and what appears to be part of the tail, a cockpit canopy, and an ACES-2 injection seat. What has not been independently confirmed is the origin of every item in the new display, or every Iranian claim about how the drones were recovered. But if Iran really recovered major sections of an MQ-9 or Hermes 900, the intelligence value is obvious. These are long-endurance aircrafts built around surveillance. Engineers can examine the antennas, the optical systems, the stabilization hardware, the data-linked components, and the way that the sensors are mounted and protected. Even incomplete hardware can help an adversary understand what to jam, what to hide from, and what signatures Western systems may be looking for. The MQ-9 losses are not merely an Iranian propaganda claim. A United States official has put total Reaper losses during the war at roughly 30, with some aircraft shut down in flight and others lost on the ground. The Air Force has still called the Reaper one of its most valuable platforms in this campaign because it can remain over the battlefield for long periods without putting a pilot inside the Iranian airspace. That matters because this war is becoming a contest of adaptation. The United States and Israel study how Iranian air defense systems react. Iran studies how Western aircrafts communicate, collect intelligence, and approach the defensive areas. The next round is shaped by what both sides learned in the previous one. The same principle explains why the Revolutionary Guard's fast boats forces remain a problem in Hormuz even after heavy damages to Iran's conventional navy. The Guards do not need a large destroyer to challenge commercial shipping lanes. They can disperse small armed boats, as you can see right next to me in the screen, drones, coastal missiles, and then also mines across narrow opening areas. Then they force a much larger navy to watch many possible threats at the same time. So neutralizing that kind of force is not one dramatic naval battle. It requires persistent surveillance, air and maritime patrols, mine-controlled capabilities, protected commercial movement, and also the ability to suppress launch positions when attacks begin. That's expensive. It's manpower-intensive work, and it has to continue every day that the tankers are moving. Yemen is showing the same logic from another direction. In the latest strike on Mocha, Yemeni forces said that 11 drones were intercepted, but 7 people were still killed, 4 soldiers and 3 civilians, and around 30 were wounded. Hours later, air defense systems around Eden opened fire at additional drones near the presidential compound. The Houthis have not claimed that those incidents around Eden, so their origin remains still unclear and uncertain. The attack on Mocha followed a much heavier Houthi push against the government forces in Marib and Hadramaut. The toll in that earlier round remains disputed. Initial credible counts were at least 30, while other regional reportings put it as high as 58. The operational point is the trend. The Houthis are increasing the pressure on Saudi-backed forces while probing Saudi infrastructure and the Red Sea access at the same time. For Saudi Arabia, this is the first operational question facing the new defensive pact with Turkey and Pakistan. A treaty can promise collective defenses. It still has to define whether that means intelligence, air defenses, logistics, deployed aircrafts, or direct combat against the forces that launched an attack. And those are very different commitments. Inside Iran, the chain of command is hardening as well. Lushan Razai now sits at the center of the Supreme National Security Council, while hardline factions are challenging the parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and pushing for more authority to move towards institutions that are closely tied to the Revolutionary Guards. That does not prove that every sanction wants the same outcome. It shows that the argument in Tehran is no longer simply war versus diplomacy. It's also an argument over who controls the diplomacy, who defines the victory, and who decides when the price of resistance has become too high. And before we continue, I want to ask you to help me share the truth of what's happening here in Israel. Hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel. Hit it, please. That really helps us to reach more people around the world. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, why it's important to fight the Houthis in Yemen, why it's important for Americans. That's a big question. Know that what you see here on YouTube is only part of the story, and you can get closer, first-hand reportings, behind-the-scene moments, and stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel by going to tbn.org/journeys/boots. Again, that's tbn.org/journeys/boots. And you can also text the word boots to 316-316 if you're texting from North America to receive updates of what's happening here in Israel. So when Ashlea and I are bringing you the updates today, we're telling you what we see, feel, and hear on the ground here in Israel so that you will know how to pray for the situation, okay? That's the point where the battlefield matters. What's happening on the ground in the Middle East hits what happens in the White House. So now I want to turn to Ashlea Alex and ask her, Trump is slowing the military tempo in the Middle East and betting that Iran's economy will force a decision. What exactly is that bet?
Yair, President Trump is making a very deliberate distinction between military capability and political necessity. The United States still has the ability to strike Iran. Trump has not taken that option off the table. What he is doing, at least for now, is asking whether another large wave of airstrikes would produce a better result than allowing the economic blockade to keep tightening. That's why his language has changed. He says the United States is low-keying it with Iran. He describes the contacts as only a partial negotiation. And he compares the confrontation to a chess game, arguing that Washington can afford to watch Iran's inflation, cash shortage, and internal pressure develop before making the next move. Only about a week ago, Trump was reportedly close to authorizing another broad military operation. That matters because his current restraint should not be confused with a permanent decision against military force. There is a domestic reason for the patience as well. Oil has been trading only a little above $75 a barrel in the figures Trump cited. A full reopening of Hormuz could reduce the risk premium in global energy markets and ease pressure on American consumers. For a president looking toward the November midterm elections, energy prices are not a side issue. They are part of the political calculation surrounding the war. That helps explain why Hormuz has moved ahead of the nuclear file on the immediate American agenda. Trump has reportedly discussed the possibility of ending the current confrontation if commercial shipping through the Strait becomes reliable again, even if a broader nuclear agreement is postponed. His argument is that Iran's nuclear infrastructure has already suffered major damage, American intelligence can watch for rebuilding, and the threat of another strike can remain in place. Israel is far less comfortable with that logic. From Jerusalem's perspective, intelligence can detect many things, but it does not remove enriched material, destroy scientific knowledge, or guarantee that a covert program cannot reappear somewhere else. The American question is how to end the present war. The Israeli question is what military and nuclear capability Iran may still possess after the war is declared over. For Trump, economic pressure is supposed to bridge that gap. Iran's most important oil export terminal is on Karg Island. Recent satellite-based reporting indicated that normal tanker loading there had nearly stopped for days. Karg handles the overwhelming majority of Iranian crude exports. When tankers cannot leave, production eventually has to be reduced because storage fills up. That's where a naval blockade becomes an economic weapon without firing a missile at an oil field. The latest IMF figures project Iran's economy to contract by about 6.1% this year, with average consumer price inflation near 68.9% and unemployment around 9.2%. Recent reporting citing Iranian labor data also points to roughly 450,000 jobs lost over the past year. Iran's own recent food price readings have been even more severe, climbing above 120% year over year in some categories and periods. Those numbers explain why President Masoud Pezeshkian has been warning that the economy itself has become a battlefield. There are also reports that the government is struggling to meet payments to parts of its security apparatus. Trump has seized on that point publicly, arguing that Tehran is having difficulty paying soldiers. A reported warning from Iran's central bank governor went further, saying essential food and medical stocks could come under severe pressure by the end of August if the blockade continues. That warning cannot be separated from the political fight inside the regime. Pezeshkian's camp has been described as pushing for an agreement that produces tangible economic relief. Hardliners argue that concessions made under pressure would reward Washington and weaken the regime's strategic position. The appointment of Mohsen Rezai strengthens the voice of a man whose career was built inside the Revolutionary Guards and during the Iran-Iraq War. At the same time, conservative factions are attacking Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf for taking on a broader role in negotiations and foreign contracts. The Paydari current and other hardline figures want more decision-making power concentrated inside ideological institutions and around the security establishment. So there is a paradox at the center of Trump's strategy. Economic pressure may strengthen the argument for compromise. It may also strengthen the institutions that are most willing to absorb pain and continue confrontation. The uncertainty surrounding Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei makes that problem even more complicated. Iranian media released a short video that appeared to show him in good physical condition, but the video did not clearly establish when or where it was recorded. Rumors about serious injuries have circulated for months, and there is still no reliable public medical picture. That's why claims that he is healthy, critically wounded, or close to death should all be treated carefully until there is stronger evidence. The political effect of his absence, however, is easier to see. If the Supreme Leader is rarely seen and instructions arrive mostly through written statements, competing power centers gain room to interpret what he wants. In wartime, the institutions with weapons, communications, and command structures have the greatest ability to turn an interpretation into policy. For Washington, that creates a basic negotiating problem. Who can promise an agreement, and who can enforce it inside Iran? Now, add the Pentagon's own limitation. Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg has given major defense companies 21 days to present plans for sharply faster deliveries and increased production of critical weapons. The memo is real. The political argument is over what it means. Trump rejects the idea that the United States is running out of weapons. The Pentagon says the production push is part of a wider effort to rebuild the defense industrial base. Both statements can be true at the same time. A country can still possess large stockpiles and decide that the rate of consumption is too high for the rate of replacement. Patriot and THAAD interceptors are a perfect example. They're sophisticated missiles produced through supply chains that cannot be doubled overnight. A prolonged campaign against ballistic missiles forces commanders to think about inventory not only for Iran, but also for every other theater where those interceptors may be needed. That does not mean an Iranian missile gets a free path because America is out. It means commanders become more selective, production schedules become strategic issues, and another month of high-intensity combat has a cost far beyond the Gulf. Economic pressure is attractive, partly because it consumes fewer interceptors. The same calculation is driving countries around the United States to build their own insurance policies. The new Saudi-Turkish-Pakistani defense agreement is the clearest example of this. Turkish officials say its mutual defense principle is technically comparable to NATO's Article 5. An armed attack on one member is treated as an attack on the others. That does not make it NATO. NATO has integrated planning, decades of exercises, established command structures, and procedures for moving forces during a crisis. The Mecca Agreement is new. Its military credibility will be measured by what happens when one member asks the others to take a real risk. Still, the capabilities being connected are significant. Saudi Arabia brings money, energy, leverage, and access to advanced Western systems. Turkey brings a large conventional military, NATO experience, and a defense industry that has grown rapidly in drones, missiles, and armored systems. Pakistan brings a large army and something neither of the other two possess: a nuclear arsenal. Pakistan is estimated to hold around 170 nuclear warheads. That does not mean Riyadh suddenly possesses a Pakistani nuclear umbrella, and the agreement does not publicly create one. But the presence of a nuclear-armed state changes how every outside capital studies the alliance. Turkey is the political variable Israel watches most closely. Ankara has forces and bases across several theaters, including Syria, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. It has expanded drone exports and defense partnerships, while its political relationship with Jerusalem has become increasingly hostile. Pakistan's defense minister has gone even further rhetorically, calling for Muslim states to unite in the face of what he described as the Israeli threat. Saudi Arabia is approaching the same pact from a different direction. Riyadh wants protection from Iran and the Houthis. It also wants to reduce the risk of depending on one external guarantor. The lesson Saudi leaders appear to have drawn from this war is not that America is irrelevant. It is that American support may not always arrive in the form, timing, or scale that they want. That makes the pact a hedge. It also creates contradictions. Pakistan must think about India. Saudi Arabia sells enormous amounts of oil to India and has no interest in importing Islamabad's rivalry into every economic decision. Egypt, if it joins, brings control of the Suez Canal and one of the region's largest militaries. But Cairo and Ankara have spent years competing over Libya, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The more countries join, the more power the alliance can claim on paper, and the more national interests it has to reconcile in a real crisis. For Israel, there's another consequence. A Saudi Arabia with more security options may feel less pressure to build its entire future deterrent structure around normalization with Israel and guarantees from Washington. That does not kill normalization. It changes the bargaining environment. It could also affect plans for trade corridors connecting India, the Gulf, Israel, and Europe. Those projects depend on political trust between countries whose security calculations are now moving in different directions. And while Washington is trying to stabilize the Gulf, another disagreement is opening between the Trump administration and Israel in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly rejected the current 15-point roadmap associated with the Board of Peace. His position is that the IDF will not make another withdrawal until Hamas is genuinely disarmed, not only its heavy weapons, but its broader armed infrastructure. The American-backed concept is built around an international stabilization mechanism and a technocratic civilian administration. The problem is sequencing. Washington wants a political structure that can replace wartime rule. Israel wants proof that Hamas loses the coercive power that allows it to dominate that structure from behind the scenes. Recent testimony from inside Gaza explains the Israeli concern. Residents describe young men, some 18, 19, and 20 years old, appearing at intersections with Kalashnikov rifles while wearing civilian clothes and masks. They say some recruits are being paid roughly 600 to 700 shekels because they need money. Other residents describe interrogation centers, armed patrols, and Hamas personnel operating from command locations inside hospital compounds. They also describe intimidation of critics and the use of force against people who openly challenge the organization. The financial side is just as important. A commander of an anti-Hamas militia in Khan Yunis says Hamas takes a share of commercial activity that can range from 18% to 35% or even 40% in some cases. Residents say merchants who refuse to pay can be detained and abused. Cigarettes, smuggling, and taxation are all described as revenue sources. One Gaza resident offered a very specific warning about symbolic disarmament. He claimed Hamas could hand over 500 rifles for the cameras while retaining tens of thousands more. The exact inventory cannot be independently verified. But the point is the one Israel is focused on. Counting a ceremony is not the same as measuring capability. Israel security assessments are also watching Ali al-Amoudi, a Hamas figure released in the 2011 Shalit deal, who has risen inside the organization after the loss of senior leaders. He is associated with the camp of Yahya Sinwar and Khalil al-Hayya and has a background in Hamas media and messaging. That background matters because a political transition can be manipulated through information as effectively as through weapons. A technocratic committee may hold office space and official titles, while another network still controls armed men, money, tunnels, and fear in the neighborhoods. This is why the Gaza dispute is not separate from the argument over Iran. Trump is trying to turn military pressure into negotiated outcomes across several fronts. Israel is insisting that those outcomes must be measurable on the ground. Lebanon provides another example. Hezbollah is under the most serious financial pressure it has faced in years. Israel has shrunk branches linked to Al-Qad al-Hassan, money changers, and revenue-producing infrastructure. Washington has targeted financial facilitators, while Lebanese authorities have increased oversight of transfer companies and the cash economy. The collapse of the Assad regime removed the easiest land corridor between Iran and Lebanon. Iran then tried other routes. One involved cash moving through Beirut's airport. Lebanese restrictions on flights from Iran and the removal of Hezbollah-linked personnel from sensitive airport positions made that route more difficult. The organization adapted by relying more heavily on informal Hawala networks moving value through places such as the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Iraq. American sanctions have targeted some of those facilitators as well. Hezbollah has also turned to gold. Officials connected to Al-Qad al-Hassan have been accused of building companies that convert gold holdings into liquidity. At the same time, families whose homes were destroyed have seen promised compensation delayed or stopped, and parts of Hezbollah's social service system have been reduced. Before the current war, American estimates put Iranian support to Hezbollah at roughly $700 million a year. More recent reporting indicated Iran pushed even more money toward the organization, with around $1 billion moved through various channels in a single year. But war changes the calculation. Paying fighters is one bill. Replacing missiles, vehicles, communications equipment, and underground infrastructure is another. Supporting displaced families is another. Political influence in Lebanon also costs money. Financial pressure does not automatically disarm Hezbollah. It forces the organization to prioritize. And that brings us back to the same strategic argument Washington is having over Iran. Can financial pain produce a political result before the military organization finds another way around it? The negotiations between Israel and Lebanon show how difficult that is. Another round of talks is not expected immediately. Israel and the United States are resisting additional withdrawals before there is verifiable progress in areas already designated for Hezbollah's removal. Hezbollah, for its part, is pressuring the Lebanese government to close the direct negotiating channel and is using a disputed Israeli map as part of that political campaign. Diplomacy can draw a line on a map. It cannot by itself confirm that a tunnel is empty, a weapons depot is gone, or a militia can no longer move money. That is the point I want to hand back to Yair, because all of these political plans eventually collide with something soldiers can physically inspect. Yair, from Hormuz to Gaza to southern Lebanon, the question is no longer whether agreements can be written. It's whether anyone can verify what the armed organizations still have after the ink dries.
Thank you very much, Ashlea, for coming back to us. And that's exactly what the Israeli forces are measuring on the ground. Because in southern Lebanon, the 55th Brigade Combat Team and the Yalam Engineering Forces are operating under Division 91st. They are destroying an underground shaft that is used to store AK-47 rifles and also anti-tank missiles and launchers, including artillery weapons and RPGs. Around the Ali Taher Ridge, Israeli forces have also been working against a deeper Hezbollah underground system, while preventing operatives from using the terrain to escape or rebuild. There's a second warning that Israel is taking very seriously. A censorship-cleared report says that officials in one regional country advised another country to consider a tactical agreement with Israel, use the calm to reduce Israel's alertness, and continue preparing for a future confrontation. The countries were not identified, so there is no responsible basis to attach that warning to any specific government. That's why Israel is looking for verification, not for atmosphere. A ceasefire can lower the sound of explosions, but it does not tell you that a missile and a missile unit was dismantled and not preparing for the next launch. It doesn't tell you that a tear tunnel was sealed or not, or whether the money is still reaching the people rebuilding the tunnels and the missiles. So across this region, the next phase will be decided by whether economic pressure and diplomacy can remove real military capabilities before the armed groups use the pause to recover. If that test fails, which front forces the next major strike first? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And in the meantime, keep spreading the truth. Follow us and help us tell the story of what's happening on the ground here in Israel and the Middle East. Remember that this is a spiritual war, and the first casualty of a war, especially a spiritual war, is the truth. So keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the IDF soldiers, stand with those that are risking their lives in this region, if it's also the U.S. forces that are here all around Iran. Let's pray for them and for their families. Let's pray for our enemies, not to succeed in their plans to destroy us, but to have a change of heart. God can make that happen. Let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. See you again tomorrow.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.